It is 8 o'clock, so let's begin with a word of prayer. Dear Lord, we thank you for today. We thank you for your blessings. We thank you for Christmas. And we ask, Lord, you be with us and help us in our Bible study to have a profitable time together. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
So, good evening, Mrs. Dye. And as you join, if you can comment who you are, because Facebook doesn't tell us who you are, just that you are here. All right, so this evening we are doing our Christmas themed Bible study. And I realize it's 2 days after Christmas, but it just worked better for my brain to do Christmas today instead of last Saturday. So we are going to talk about the Christmas star or the Star of Bethlehem. Um, and this was sparked by the fact that my son was shared a video about the Star of Bethlehem, and he was interested in the guy's theory and shared it with me, although I had to read the articles instead of the video for technical reasons. And so, anyway, so that's what we decided to talk about. Good evening, Brenda. It's good to have you here tonight. Savy, do you have anything you want to say in introduction or as we get started?
I don't think so.
Okay. So we are after Christmas. And since we are after Christmas, it's appropriate to talk about the wise men because the wise men came after Christmas. At least that seems to be the case from Scripture. Probably were not there at the same time as the shepherds. Of course, traditionally they arrived 12 days later on Epiphany. But when it actually happened, we don't know. And maybe we'll talk about that a little bit as we get into our discussion. But it's appropriate to talk about the wise men and the star after Christmas, since they probably were events that happened after Christmas. Um, so we have 7 points that we want to talk about relating to the Star of Bethlehem. Um, Stevie, do you want to take the first one, or you want me to take the first one?
Maybe we should say that part of this is reviewing uh, Frederick Larson's theory on the Bethlehem Star is the specific one that inspired this.
Uh,
And that's kind of a lot of my notes were critiquing his theory and alternate ideas about it. But
And the alternate ideas are primarily coming from the Answers in Genesis website and Dr. DeYoung's book Astronomy and the Bible, which have the same conclusion, which disagrees with Larson's suggestion. So um, that's it's not really a debate as much as it is a discussion between those two. And good evening, Albertsons. Thank you for coming tonight. There are others of you here. If you would like to comment who you are, so that we can know, because Facebook doesn't tell us. We'd appreciate that. Okay. Thank you, Stevie, for that. So the first thing that Larson does suggest is the fact that we have some possibility of figuring out what the star is because of the predictability of the stars. And I was going to throw this in and see if he can make his own direction with it. Um, I did think it was important to bring this up simply because, good evening, Debbie. Happy anniversary. Um, so the fact that the heavens are in fact predictable. This is actually a product of the Reformation leading into modern science. The idea that because God is a God of order, the Creator what is not random. The stars do not have like volition of their own, and so they do follow laws that were established by their Creator. That's a very strong uh, creationist biblical science perspective, but it does lead us to being able to know what happened in the heavens in the past. And good evening, Campbell family. It's good to have you here tonight. Stevie, what would you like to comment on that point?
I mean, I just think it's fascinating that a lot of historical events we can just like turn back the clock on the stars and see exactly what they saw and different things, and it's very interesting. It's also useful to I think predict the eclipses. Uh, there's stories like about Columbus using an eclipse to threaten to blot out the sun to escape, and other interesting stories like that. So it's the precision of it is it's very interesting how it manifests.
And in fact, that could be a whole topic because that precision has been used to make discoveries. Um, and as Stevie said, you can go back into history and into the future both. And with modern science, you can get an app for your phone or your computer that will precisely lay out the stars for you on any particular date that you want. So it does allow us to do some looking back into time, what was happening in those 5-6 years BC, what was happening in the heavens, and what can we know for fairly certain was there. Okay,
And
go ahead.
finding the Bethlehem star was actually one of the first things Kepler did when he was
Hmm.
uh, well, formulating his theories of planetary motion and so on. So
Good evening, Stephanie. Yes,
just finding the star goes back a long ways.
yes. Kepler, and then Newton is the other one that did a lot with the movement of the heavens, but Kepler specifically with the Star of Bethlehem. Okay, go ahead and introduce Frederick's second point, Stevie.
So the next big thing is the date of Herod's death and Christ's birth. Um, and I guess this is sort of the last one I wrote down, but I think it's best to bring it up first. Is that if this date is a huge deal, if his date is wrong, his entire theory collapses. So, what of the two most common dates is the correct one is kind of what everything hinges on, as far as his theory specifically. So,
And the well, backing up, it says that Jesus was born during the days of Herod the king. And of course, if you've read Matthew 2, without Herod the Great, there is no Matthew 2. I mean, he kind of is a key figure to that whole account. So he has to die after Jesus' birth. Herod died somewhere between 1 and 4 BC, which does mean that Jesus was not born at the change of BC to AD. That was a mistake in the calendar maker many years later. Got close within a few years, but Jesus was born BC, which sounds a little funny. He was born before Christ, but we know that he was born before Herod died. And so if Herod died in 1 BC, which is sorry,
the earlier theory,
what's the guy's name?
Larson. Oh.
Larson's theory. If that's Larson's date as 1 BC, then that means that Jesus could be born 2 or 3 BC. The more accepted date is 4 BC, which puts Jesus' birth at typically 4 or 5. So like Herod died in 4 BC, Jesus was born just shortly before that in 4 BC, maybe 5. And that means that any astronomical events in 2 or 3 BC are not up for grabs for the Star of Bethlehem. But if Herod died in 1 BC, then you open up 2 more years worth of astronomical events that you can look to line up with the Star of Bethlehem.
Did you do much research in which date is more accurate?
I did not do much.
Okay.
What I did find was that it's the majority opinion is 4 BC, 1 BC is the minority opinion. Is that what you found also?
Basically, and 1 is the older tradition, 4 is the newer.
Oh, really? I did not realize that.
There was an interesting thing they were discussing about the reigns of Herod's successors.
Okay.
And when they begin, and where some of them say they begin, makes it has to be 4 BC. However, we know that they said they started their reigns earlier than the death of the previous one.
Okay.
Like, we know that for sure. Like some of them are up to 6 BC.
Mm.
So we know that they already do that. So that doesn't really offer a nail in the coffin either way, because they dating could still be 1 BC. They just say they started reigning early.
Gotcha.
So that was like quick research.
What did you run across? What is the strongest argument for 1 BC? As opposed
there are scholars, Larson specifically, his was a miscopying of Josephus in like 1544 or something like that. And after that, everyone says it's 4. Before that, it was 1 BC.
Okay.
And so he claims that earlier manuscripts are actually more accurate, and that's why he went with the 1 BC number. But a lot of modern scholars go with 4 BC. So that it seems that they're both plausible, and we just don't know for sure.
And I did think that because Larson's entirely depends on his date, and the fact that his date is the minority view, is probably the biggest issue I have with his well, no, it's one of 2 big issues I have with his argument, and that isn't even a strong argument against it. It's more like I'm not really strongly convinced. I would have to do more research into the 1 BC date for me to be convinced.
Right, I just did a quick look, and just like both scholars think both are possible.
Yeah, so that's kind of a an ambiguous toss up on that one. Um, Something that I was not aware of was the various ways of translating in the East. We have come to Jerusalem, and we are looking for um, the king because we saw his star in the east. I just want to respond to Stephanie's. Yes, if you do apps, Google search, that kind of thing, you will get 4 BC because that is the majority opinion, and most of your search engines will go with the majority opinion. If you want to get the minority opinion, you have to dig deeper. That's true for any search. So the 4 BC is definitely a majority opinion. Sorry about that. Is definitely the majority opinion. But 1 BC does seem to be a legitimate alternate view. And we are people who do believe in alternate views on a lot of issues as Christians. So we don't always go with the majority for some reason. Okay, so in the East, do you want to comment or want me to?
Yeah, I went through a whole bunch of different translations.
Okay.
And a lot of them, newer ones, say at its rising or when it rose instead of in the east, which I didn't realize before, like you said.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting idea.
I think, let me back up to the two interpretations I've always heard of in the East. Some people, I read that and they read that that the wise men saw the star to their east. We saw it in the east of us. I've always read it as we saw his star when we were in the east. So those are two different ways of thinking about in the east. Were they looking east when they saw the star? That feels weird in one sense because they went west, but they saw the star in the east. Assuming that they did come from Persia, which don't have actually in our list of points anywhere. Second thing is, if they were in the east when they saw it, that makes sense. They saw it while they were in the east, and then they come to Jerusalem. The reason it's translated east when in fact it's literally at its rising is because stars, sun, moon all rise in the east. So at its rising can mean in the east because it's like a metaphorical literary device to refer to the east is the place of the rising, kind of.
I did some Greek study quick. The word is Anatole, and it's translated east twice, but the third time it's translated sunrise or at the sunrise. So it's and the two that say in the east are both in Matthew 2, and the third one is another place.
I didn't go deep into this. It appears that whether it's plural or not makes a difference in how they think it should. Well, some people argue it should be translated based on whether it's plural or not.
Yeah, I didn't see that. But I just looked up the Greek word and where it was.
Yeah, I did a little bit of that as well. I went Strong's and I'd like check the Net Bible, which the Net Bible does go with at its rising.
I think NIV is at its rising, and KJV and some other ones were in the east, and then when it rose is another one I found.
Which opens up some interesting perspectives. Larson says at its rising means that it rose in the east like a normal star, sun, moon, planet.
Everything rises
in the east. I ran across one, I think it was on the article I read on AIG site, I'm not sure though. They said because it says at its rising rather than in the east, that could mean that it didn't rise in the east. They saw it when it arose, but it didn't necessarily arise from the normal location. And they just say, we saw it when it came up, when it appeared to us. We saw it at its appearing.
ESV is when it rose.
Okay, which would fit with that idea of when it rose, not giving a direction, but a time frame. I'm not sure I want to fight that argument. Like, it typically means in the east because that's where things rise. So to use it to mean it rose from the zenith or from the north or something.
I feel like if it rose someplace abnormal, they might have said that. And they were just saying it rose just like everything else does. Like we saw it when it rose, and it was normal. That's when it happened.
And it could be that they're emphasizing we have seen this since its appearing. Like we've been watching this from day one. We saw it as soon as anyone could. Anyway, that was interesting. I never heard the when it rose at its rising anytime before this, and so that was a new one. And it does leave open a lot of questions. It doesn't really change the argument, I feel like, because if it rose in the east, whatever explanation you're going to, well, Not quite. There's a couple of these explanations that would fit better with when it rose than in the east, and actual as far as rising in the east. So, but I'm not sure that's very significant. Okay, this is kind of more of a one of those Christmas myth things that I threw in, and that is, did the wise men follow the star to Jerusalem? And most people, I think, tend to think that they did, but there is no indication in Scripture that they followed the star from the east to Jerusalem. It just says, we have seen his star in the east when it rose, and we have come. It doesn't say, and we followed it here. It brought us to you, Herod. Where's this king? It's more like, well, we just know there should be a king born of the Jews, and we came to the capital of Judea to find the king.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what you meant exactly when you wrote that down. I was like, I didn't. I was like, I don't think they followed the star to Jerusalem at all. So.
Yeah, well, I think that's relevant perhaps in looking at what it is, because if they're following it from Persia to Jerusalem and then from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, I think that would eliminate some of your choices. Whereas if they simply saw it in Persia and then because of its appearing, they headed to Jerusalem, I think it does make some effect on what you're going to assume that it is.
And since they didn't follow it literally, that means that something else about the star indicated that they needed to go to Jerusalem. It was related to the Jews, which we'll get to
right
soon.
Right.
And later in the argument.
Yes. And then, well, actually, maybe we need to go. We need to kind of add that in. I don't think it's on my list. Could everyone see the star? And this is another one of those things. We have this tendency to assume everyone saw the star. We just sang a Christmas carol. I don't remember which day it was over the Christmas season when it talks about the shepherds. They saw the angels and then they saw the star. No record the shepherds ever saw the star. Now they might have, but we don't have any record that the shepherds saw the star. We have no record that anyone saw the star other than the Magi. Those are the only people that we have any record of seeing the star.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I think that if only they could see it, that would mean that it had to be supernatural.
Well, Larson
if
makes
they could see it now, notice is something different. So I think anyone could have noticed it, unless you're saying it was supernatural and only they could see it.
Okay, so right, so it opens up two choices. Larson makes the argument, as do others, that it couldn't be something, we're getting ahead into our options here, but something, let's say, it couldn't be something so obvious that everyone saw it, because Herod obviously didn't see it. He says, when did this appear? He had never seen it. And we have no record of anyone else seeing it. So it doesn't seem to be something that was in your face, extremely obvious, like we often put in our pictures. That could mean it was supernatural and was only for their eyes, or it could mean something that only a magi who was an astrologer, kind of ancient astronomer, only they would notice, and other people might have noticed seen it but wouldn't have noticed it. For example, maybe the shepherds could have seen it but not realize its significance because they're ignorant shepherds, at least ignorant of stars and mythology relating to stars. They wouldn't have seen any significance to it even if they saw it. Herod wouldn't see it at all because he probably didn't take time to stop and look at the stars. So it's either something supernatural or something that requires expertise to notice the significance of.
Yeah. And since they were astronomer, scientist people, it makes sense that they would notice something other people wouldn't.
It would.
So I think
agreed.
That seems the most likely explanation, unless it. I mean, even if it was supernatural, other people might have been able to see it too. Well, we don't know for sure, even in that case.
A supernatural event could either be public or private, depending on what God wanted. Good evening, Paul. Good to have you with us this evening. Okay, so what is implied, and I think this is the, to me, second most important question that we're going to deal with, and yes, the reappearing we will deal with in just a moment, and right now. What is the significance, or what is implied when it says which they saw in the east the star which they saw in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was. what all is implied in those words. And I think this is the second big issue with Larson's theory and any theory that you're going to propose. The date is one, and then I think this is the second one. What does it mean that it led them from Jerusalem to Bethlehem and then stood over where the child was?
Yeah. So I looked at the Greek at this one too, and um, I feel like the went before them is the more significant part than the stood over where the young child was,
Okay.
because the Greek is vague over literally where it says stood over where the young child was. That could be the town, the house, the region, the block, the neighborhood,
Okay.
because it's just where it was like it's not a specific detailed location. It's
Okay.
just like yeah, it's a good translation where the young child was. All of them are about that vague.
Um, and that would, and I would guess I would, okay, I'm interested. Go ahead with the went before them since that
Well,
comes
because that
first.
seems to indicate, like Stefan said, that it moved in front of them. Uh, so that one seems to be more of a problem than stood over where the young child was. If it's like on the horizon over Bethlehem, that seems an adequate explanation. But went before them seems to indicate it might have moved. So that part seems to be more of
And
a
the
problem.
more significant part of that when it moved is that it's going 6 miles north to south.
Right, which
From
is the odd part.
Jerusalem to Bethlehem is north south, southward. And so nothing in the heavens naturally moves north south. Everything moves east west, except for a couple of things we're going to talk about. There are a couple, but stars, planets, sun, moon, all of them go east to west. Planets do wander a little bit, but it's still on the east west pathway because they're all in the because of the way the solar system is arranged. So going north south, and in fact, that it's only 6 miles is also to me the 6 miles, and I'm not quite as comfortable as Stevie is with saying that anything in the general area counts as over where the child was, because it says they're following. It implies they're following the star, and they found the child. They already knew he was in Bethlehem. I guess that was mentioned in the article that
Yeah,
I
they
read. They already know he's in Bethlehem. So the fact that the star is over Bethlehem makes the star purely superfluous because they already knew he was in Bethlehem. Like the prophets told them that. So if it's just somewhere over southern Judea or over Bethlehem in general, that doesn't feel significant. It has, yeah, I think it has to be more specific than that in order for it to be over where the child was.
yeah.
Um, Paul, we talked quite a bit about East already. You'll have to go back and listen to our earlier discussion because that's a significant point, and we discussed it at length earlier. Um, so
Yeah.
that so this
You would just take it as they saw it when they left, and like this confirms that Bethlehem is the right place. And the force of the verse is vague enough
yeah
that you can't really be like it has to be this, has to be this. So we have to keep going. I feel like at the end, what we're going to come to, it's either A or B, general ideas,
yeah
and we'll just have to
yeah
decide.
we have
What do you
like
think is
we we have
better?
about 5 choices, and we're going to narrow it down to two of them. Is what it,
Well, yeah,
what it
I
boils
was
down
thinking
to.
of too general. It's
Oh,
either supernatural, and you have to read the verse in a more precise way, or it's a natural event and you have to read the verse in a little more vague way.
right.
And that's really your two options.
And I would agree that if it's the broader one, it would just be yes, Herod's priests told us this, and now the star that we already saw once that started this whole thing is confirming that. So that would be the general way. Um,
He didn't go anything in his Larson into how they found the exact house. I feel like other people have discussed that Bethlehem's not that big of a town, and maybe they just asked around.
except, and okay, let me just real
I'm
quickly.
not sure because that didn't come up in what we were studying,
Right.
so
Well,
I
let me
didn't
just
look
real
into it.
quickly mention this because some of you know this is one of my hobby horses, and that is the fact that there is no inn in Luke chapter 2, that the word there is no room for them, the inn should be there is no room for them in the guest room. And so the maybe not more likely, it's very likely, or it is a likely option that Mary and Joseph were staying in a relative's house, but they were staying in the courtyard because the guest room had gone to grandpa or great uncle or someone of significance. And Mary and Joseph, as the young married couple with a questionable pregnancy, got stuck in the courtyard with the animals, which is where they kept their animals, was in the courtyard. And she laid him in the manger because they couldn't go to the guest room. If that's the case, number one, the fact that the wise men found him in a house isn't significant because he always was in a house. And secondly, it would be a little harder to simply ask around Bethlehem, where's the baby that was born in the stable? Because that's really significant. Which baby was born in the courtyard wouldn't be, well, the wise men weren't told that. The wise men don't have that to go with. So they're just looking for a baby. Possibly Bethlehem was small enough there was only one baby. But that would also bring us back to how long did it take them to get there, which I don't think we've mentioned. We kind of did at the very beginning. 2 to 4 months is a typical trip from what I could discover in my research previously. 2 to 4 months. So if we go with 3 months as an average, they're looking for a 3-month-old child. And that might have been, there might have only been one child of the right age. There might have been more. Which does bring Herod's massacre into a different perspective, because if Bethlehem is small enough that there's only one 3-month-old child, there probably weren't that many 2-year-old and under. Tragic for those families, but maybe not the massive massacre that we often envision. But anyway, just kind of perspective on that.
Maybe why it's not mentioned a lot of other places.
Well, especially considering Herod killed possibly more of his relatives than he did babies in Bethlehem.
Do we know the size of Bethlehem at that time?
Small.
Okay.
That's what I'm guessing. I could do better than that if I had some
like
time.
Hundreds, maybe. Total.
I'm guessing possibly less.
Even less. Okay.
But I'd have to look it up.
I mean, if there's less than 200 people, there only being one child, the right age range is not that.
Right.
Not that ridiculous.
And that also would reduce the massacre size significantly. Okay. So what are the suggested candidates for this? One of them is a supernova. A supernova is an exploding star, is very bright, very easily seen. Typically in ancient times, this was considered significant, as in it signified something. It typically did mean something, or was interpreted to mean something. So a supernova is one of the suggestions that has been presented.
Yeah, I wrote not long enough, question mark, because I wasn't sure how much of an argument that was, but that seems to be a strike against it.
That's one.
It's only a few days normally, as I understand. 2 weeks, days to weeks.
I think you're right. I think there might be exceptions to that. So it could be an exceptional one, but often they aren't very long. They are something that everyone would see. And I think it would be one that would
be likely to be recorded other places in history.
Yes, supernovas have been recorded in history. We actually know particular, like I think it's the Crab Nebula. I didn't look this up because I didn't think about it. I think it's the Crab Nebula that we actually have historically when it supernovaed. And now what we can see in the telescopes is simply the wreckage from it. But we have history for when it appeared. The other thing is I don't think the supernova could in any realistic way lead them from Jerusalem to Bethlehem.
Okay, that was one of my points. There's no real symbolic significance.
You could have it stand over Bethlehem in the general sense, but only in the broadest general sense.
And being in both, like observing it at both times, doesn't really work. I did think that Herod not noticing it was a weaker explanation of Larson's arguments, so I just thought that was strong against it, but the other ones I think
well, AIG also mentioned the discounted supernova on the basis that Herod should see it.
I thought that was a weaker argument because maybe he just didn't care.
Well, true. And the other thing is it wouldn't have risen. So which takes us back to that discussion about the East, and in the rising, it wouldn't rise. A supernova would simply appear, which depending on which way you interpret it, that could be an argument for it or against it.
Someone's getting ahead.
Yes, they are. With number 2 is a comet, Stephanie. Number 2 is a comet. No, that's great. Thank you for commenting. That's not a slam at all. You are just getting ahead of our notes. Comet is number 2. Problem with comet is comets in history have always been bad things. There actually are stories of wars that ended because there was a comet and it scared the armies so badly that they ran home and stopped besieging the city. So comets would not typically be interpreted by the Magi as, um, oh, the birth of a king. It'd be more like, okay, who died? Um, would be more the
Yeah.
reaction.
I
Um,
I thought that was a weaker argument of his. Um, but I mean, Herod took it badly.
well, true,
So
true.
I guess it
From
depends.
Herod's point of view, a comet would make
So
sense.
I mean, a comic could have indicated something positive. I don't think. I think there are stronger arguments against them, I would say.
The other thing with a comet is that comets are predictable. Again, now supernovas are not predictable, so that's one that would be we would have to go to history for, and there isn't anything in history. Comets, no comet that we are aware of would have been there at the time. However, comets do wear out and die. As those of you who heard me do young Earth creation stuff, comets wear out. So if the comet that appeared at the time of Jesus' birth simply disappeared, so we don't have it today, we would not be able to predict it.
But there would have likely been other ancient records or older records of it that would
Correct.
match. So
For example, Halley's Comet, we know it appeared, and I believe, if I remember reading correctly, it actually is recorded when it appeared. It would be like 60 BC, something like. Anyways, before it was well before the Christmas. Halley's Comet doesn't work. Halley's Comet also doesn't do well with leading them from Jerusalem to Bethlehem or standing over the place where the child was.
yeah, or
Comets, the
yeah,
path of a comet doesn't really
doesn't
work
do
for
that.
that. And again, everybody would have seen it. So that argument doesn't work well with the comet. Okay, let's get to Larson's actual suggestion. Stevie, go
The
ahead.
the conjunction, uh, which is, I think this is definitely a strong possibility. It just depends on what conjunction are we talking about.
One of the things I ran across in a number of the objections was that conjunctions typically do not look like a single star. Planets come close to each other, but they don't actually meld. And so calling it a star would have not been the way they normally would have described it for most conjunctions.
Yeah,
That doesn't attack Larson's argument,
it
however,
does not.
because the conjunction he is suggesting, which is Jupiter and,
Well,
well,
It's a couple of things. His arguments, it's a little more complicated in order to describe all the different things it does. I guess it's Jupiter basically,
okay,
but doing a bunch of things. He has his 9 different
which
points that it
backtrack,
must.
Jupiter is the king star
Oh
or
yeah,
king
that's the
planet.
first. Yeah, Jupiter, the king planet, has a triple conjunction with the king star,
Regulus.
Regulus, which was called Rex and Sharu by the Babylonians and Romans, also means king. So
Which
I see. So it seems like at that time it was known as the king star, and Jupiter was known as the royal planet at the time that happened. So it
which
indicates a king. So that would be the symbology.
and it did a triple conjunction because
Well, the path, the retrograde. Are you gonna explain
no,
the
no, because of the fact that both the planets and the Earth are orbiting the sun. One of the weird things about the way planets move and why it was hard to figure out what was going on with a geocentric view was the fact that the planets appear to go backwards at times, and that's because the Earth passes the planet, because we're going faster than they are. And it's kind of like one illustration said it's like when you're on a highway and if you pass somebody from your point of view, they are going backwards. Physics class for those of you who remember that. And we are going over tonight, but we don't want to
Oh,
leave you
oh
without
wow.
the answer. So please stick around. Um, and so they call that retrograde motion. And so because of that, in like 2 BC, is it, Stevie? 2 or 3
It's like
BC?
three. It starts. It
Okay.
goes into two. The thing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's complicated. So it triple conjunction with Regulus. Then it
So
has
let me, so when, by triple conjunction, it passes Regulus, goes into retrograde, goes back past Regulus, and then starts going forward again and goes past Regulus again, making that triple conjunction.
and early. And that occurs in the constellation Leo, which is where Larson says they got the idea that it is a Jewish king because line Judah is tied together. Then it has a conjunction with Venus, where they get very close. But if you had a telescope, you could see that they're actually like form an eight, sort of.
But it
And
would have looked like a single
that it
star
would
to
have
the
looked
naked
like a
eye.
bright single star. So that's like the mother planet and the king meet. There's some other symbology. Basically, that happens, and then Jupiter stops over Bethlehem because it goes into retrograde again. So for a period of time, because that moves slow enough that so for a night or so days, it would look like it was standing over Bethlehem if you looked south of Jerusalem, basically.
And I think that to me is the weakest part of this whole cool story. The
Right.
trip because the triple conjunction and then the close conjunction, those are cool in my mind. I think those are like possibilities of they make sense of the wise men reacting to it, but nobody else reacting to it because they wouldn't have necessarily either noticed it or cared because they didn't get all the significance. But the idea that Jupiter is somehow standing over Bethlehem because it's pausing in its retrograde motion, um, and that they can follow it, therefore, from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, I'm not
It
comfortable
doesn't really
quite
go before them. It just happens to be there in the
yeah.
sky when they look.
So I think that so
That is the
the
weakest
two
spot.
weak spots for Larson are it happened in 2 to 3 BC. So if the 4 BC date is correct for Herod's death, then this is irrelevant. It's
Yeah.
afterwards. And the standing over the place where the child lay and them following it from Jerusalem because of Jupiter wouldn't go north south. It could be
Yeah.
south of them
It's
when
seen south, but it's
it,
travel south.
right. So I think
That
those are the two weak spots for Larson's
that
argument.
does happen in December of 2 BC is when
Yep.
Jupiter's in that spot. So that's kind of cool.
So it is close to the date on the birth certificate that Jesus has.
Well, it's not his birth. If you follow Larson's plan, he's actually born in like the summer, I think, because of the travel time and stuff.
Okay.
Depending
Yeah,
on
right.
So
So December
he's
would
he's
be 3 months or 4 months into his
yeah.
life.
So because it's a little more complicated, but it's also to explain how they saw it both in the east and at Bethlehem. But if Herod died earlier, there's no theory, and it doesn't really go before them. So that's and if you don't have that, then there's no natural explanation that anyone has found yet.
Yeah, that's pretty much the extent of the natural explanations, which leads you to the supernatural. And this is where Answers in Genesis on their website and Dr. DeYoung, those of you, Dr. DeYoung is an astronomer. He's one of the older guys in the creation movement, but he's in astronomy. And they go with the fact that it was a supernatural light. And that I think may bother some people because they get the feel because the wise men call it a star, they expect it to be a natural explanation. But God did use light. Somebody earlier mentioned the pillar of fire and the cloud, and that is an example where God used something similar, though probably not the same, to as a sign. And so, if it's supernatural, then the fact that it's described as we saw it at its rising could mean that it rose unnaturally, and that's why it caught their attention, and might not have caught anyone else's because other people weren't paying that close attention. It could have only been for their eyes only, which is why nobody else saw it if it's supernatural. That would explain why maybe they saw it while they were in the east, which does seem to be the case in any case. Like no matter what that means, they saw it, and then when they get to Jerusalem, it says, "And behold, the star which they had seen in the east," which kind of could be taken to mean they haven't seen it all along. If it's a natural event, they would have seen it all along. So there are a number of arguments for supernatural, and the convenient thing with supernatural is you can supernaturally fit any explanation you need to because it's supernatural and God can do it any way he wants to. So it's really hard to disprove that, but it's maybe a little harder to make it feel comfortable. And so what I laid out just now is kind of the argument for making you feel comfortable with that explanation, but it's certainly not a proof. It's just supernatural would work. Duh.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people we want to find a natural explanation because of the predictability of of um, of stars and planets, but there just may not be one.
Yeah, and Stephanie said that perhaps other people wouldn't notice a new star if God created a star. And I mean, as long as it's not like the huge stars that we put in our Christmas stories where it takes up, it's bigger than the moon. Um, People wouldn't necessarily see a new star, but an astrologer would because they were counting every star and keeping track of all of, especially the important stars. And if there was suddenly a new star that just appeared and they saw it at its rising when it appeared, wise men would notice it. Um, the other possibility, which I don't think anyone likes, but I've run across it somewhere, was that there were two separate explanations, but I realized that's unbiblical. So after I put this in my list, I realized it really doesn't fit the scripture.
My note was the passage seems to indicate it was the same star,
Yes.
and so I said that I'd rather be a supernatural event than that the Magi were just mistaken what they saw.
Well,
And
the suggestion there would be the conjunction would be explain why they thought there was a king born in in Jerusalem or in Judea, but then there was a separate supernatural light that led them from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. That's what I've heard
yeah, but
somewhere.
again, it says the same star.
It does say that,
basically,
so that's not a very biblical explanation. So we'll toss that one.
yeah.
Yeah, so we came down to basically it feels like the best explanation is one of the two, either a conjunction of some sort or a supernatural light of some sort. And it really, I don't think that the argument is strong enough to come to a conclusion. I think Stevie
Yeah,
and I
I
may
had the same thing.
we may
Especially-
lean different directions, but I think
I don't think you can come to a solid conclusion.
yeah, there's just not, as Stevie said before we started broadcasting, there's so much vagueness in the passage that there's so many things that are vague in the passage that it really makes it hard to come to a solid conclusion. Anything you want to say in conclusion?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Merry Christmas. Happy
Yes.
New Year.
Merry Christmas.
Have a good Sunday tomorrow. And please come back next Saturday and we'll go back to 1 Corinthians, topical study relating to our study of 1 Corinthians. So, well, good night.
Good night.